Good evening. We're continuing on, I guess, in our study of Exodus. We're on chapter 26. Last week in 25, we started learning about the objects or the furniture that was in the tabernacle, or the tent part when God was giving it to Moses. And it's kind of funny. How do we build a house? We start at the foundation, and then we build up, and then we finish the inside later.
But you gotta have plans first.
You gotta have plans, right. But how did God tell him? He started with the inside. He started with the furniture. Now he's going to the interior. And finally he'll go to the exterior. You know, so it's a little different. He's telling them how to do it, but typically we start out with the framework, you know. We want to build the framework and put all this on it.
But he's building the design around the furniture he designed.
He did. He had it for a specific reason, and we learned a little bit about that last week. And if we have a little bit of time, we'll talk a little bit more about the Ark of the Covenant. I get an email once a day from the Temple Institute, and it's just coinciding with what we're going through. It's talking about the shewbread, the table of shewbread, and the ark, and all that stuff. So if we have a little time, we'll talk some more about it. We're going to start off in verse 1, of course. Moreover, thou shalt make, and its continuation says it's moreover. Moreover, thou shalt make the tabernacle with 10 curtains of fine twined linen, and blue, and purple, and scarlet, with cherubims of cunning work shalt thou make them. The length of one curtain shall be 20 cubits, and the breadth of one curtain 4 cubits, and every one of the curtains shall have one measure, meaning the same size. The 5 curtains shall be coupled together one to another, and other 5 curtains shall be coupled one to another. And thou shalt make loops of blue upon the edge of one curtain, and the selvage, I guess is the way you pronounce that, in the coupling. And likewise shalt thou make in the uttermost edge of another curtain in the coupling of the second. 50 loops shalt thou make in one curtain, and 50 loops shalt thou make in the edge of the curtain that is in the coupling of the second, that the loops may take hold one another. And thou shalt make 50 taches of gold, and couple the curtains together with taches, and it shall be one tabernacle. So this is, again, we've talked about the linen that they were to be given. The people was going to give for this. And it's the fine linen that they have. And it's also included. It talks about having blue and purple and scarlet in it. Nobody knows exactly what it looked like. But it's these colors. And then it's also decorated with cherubim. Has pictures of angels. Now,
that had to all be done before, like you said, when it originally started. It's going to take a lot of time to make this.
It's going to take a while to make it. It really is. Because you just don't sit down and whip it out with your sewing machine. You know, they've got to weave it and go through. I don't know. That's, you know, I went through there, and of course we don't know, but there's different representations if you go through, and I started to bring some pictures tonight. I don't have a remote to show you up there, but you can go through and look at them on Google, and I think maybe last week's lesson, you can kind of tell a little bit, because I had it. It had a cross-section of it, and what they had was kind of they made each curtain, and it says it's 4 cubits wide, so that's about 6 feet, is what they were saying. So it's about 6 feet wide, each curtain, and it's about 40 feet in length, I think is what they said, the 28 cubits. Now, my question is, was that hanging from the top down? That's 40 feet. I don't think so. I think it went from the floor up over the top and back down. So it was, you know, like a tent. And they had a set of 5 of them, and then another set of 5. And you could do it on each way. I don't know which you know, you'd think it'd go the long way, because it's long east and west, and short north and south. The dimensions that we went over last week, and we can go back and look at those, but that's the way it is. And so I'm thinking it's going up and over the top and then down, because at the last part of this, it talks about the framework. We don't even talk about, he's talking about the curtains so far. And it starts at the front and evidently ends right at the back. Because the next level, we'll get to it in just a minute, it hangs over. It talks about it hanging over the back. Another half a curtain, which is 3 feet, or roughly 3 feet. So we don't know, but it says the plans were revealed to Moses, and it's specific. And I'm sure, here again, he told them how, okay, you want a cherubim here, and cherubim here, cherubim here, you know, on this, or maybe it's just one cherubim on each side, and one on the top, I don't know. But it was to, what was it to represent?
Presence of God.
The presence of God, but what did Daniel see? What did John see when he went in and was elevated to heaven in his visions? He saw the throne in the new temple and angels flying all around. He saw the cherubim there, and he saw them all. So that's what this is representing. The cherubim, they can't actually fly, I mean, on the tapestries, on the curtains, but that's what it's representing, to try to show us a picture of what heaven is like, or what the temple, the tabernacle up in heaven was like. This is specifically represented in this way too.
Well, you know, you may mention they started on the inside. When God saves us, He starts
On the inside. Mm-hmm. So it says on the inside of the tabernacle, one saw cherubim all around as one would see in heaven. And if you go, it's got several verses here, also Psalms, Isaiah, and Ezekiel. It says 5 curtains shall be coupled together. And here it gives, each curtain was 42 feet by 6 feet. I was off 2 feet. So it's 42 feet long and 6 feet wide. And the first 5 were joined together, and then they were joined together the second 5. So it looks like the first 5 and the second 5 were sewed together. But for some,
42 feet, that would still, you could still have walls 10 feet high.
oh yeah, that's what I think you're 10 feet here, 10 feet here, because it's 20 foot wide. 10 feet, 10 feet, and it's going to be a little bit over, because your wood's going to be there too. So I'm thinking that, you know, if you got 10 feet and 10 feet, and then you got 22 feet here, so it may be 11 foot high, to get, because it's, what it is, you go back to the Holy of Holies, and it's a square. Now, in front of it, in the Holies, it's more rectangle, is the dimensions that it kind of mentioned to us, and we can go back and look at it if we need, but it's back in the previous ones that we've looked at, and it'll tell us again as we go forward. But it tells us also these curtains to make the clasps, is what they're saying. You know, make a loop, and then over here, make a rivet, is the way I would call it, that sticks out so they can hook over it. Why they're doing this is they've got to take this down and move it. You don't want to sew it all together. That's pretty unwieldy, because it's 6 times, so it's 30 feet. Well, 30, 40. I can't do my math. 30, 60 feet and 42 feet. Because if you have 5 sets of curtains,
Wouldn't that be like covering stage from here, end to end, and we sewed it all together?
this is about 40 feet wide. So it's a little bit, it'd be 20 feet would be about half the congregation. But it's probably 10 feet to the top of the roof. I mean, the edge of the roof thing.
Yeah.
Maybe not quite, maybe a little bit higher,
That's
11
a
feet.
lot.
So it'd be right down the middle, it'd be half of this. Okay? So you'd have it on one side. So it wasn't a huge structure. A lot of times we think of it as huge. Now, the temple later on was.
It has to be something like this right here, towards the apex so the water will run off.
It does have, some appearance of that, but I think because of the skins that they used, and you gotta remember, they're kinda in the desert, so whatever rains they would have, I don't think it's gonna be very much, but I don't know, we don't know for sure. It was made to be waterproof, as we see as we'll go
That's
through
what
here.
canvas is.
It's 3 different coverings that we have. We have this first covering. The second covering, let's see, starts at 7, and thou shalt make curtains of goat's hair, to be a covering on the tabernacle. 11 curtains shalt thou make. The length of one curtain shall be 30 cubits, and the breadth of one curtain 4 cubits. And the 11 curtains shall be all one measure, and thou shalt couple 5 curtains by themselves, and 6 curtains by themselves, and shalt double the 6th curtain in the forefront of the tabernacle. And thou shalt make 50 loops on the edge of one curtain, that is outmost in the coupling, and 50 loops in the edge of the curtain which coupleth the second. And thou shalt make 50 taches of brass, not gold, and put the taches into the loops, and couple the tent together, that it may be one. And the remnant that remaineth of the curtains of the tent, the half curtain that remaineth, shall hang over the backside of the tabernacle, and a cubit on the one side, and a cubit on the other side of that which remaineth in the length of the curtains of the tent. It shall hang over the sides of the tabernacle, on this side and on that side, to cover it. So this is where it kind of gets a little confusing to me, because I'm not sure why it says it's another foot, it's another cubit longer than the other one was, and it's also one more sets of curtain. So we know it's overhanging on the back, but it's also overhanging this side further down. So I don't know if it goes all the way to the ground and then spreads out. That's where I'm a little bit. I'd like to see a diagram of it a little bit closer, and I need to find it. Maybe I'll find it next week a little bit more. We talked about last week that this goat's hair came from the long-haired goats, and most likely was black, and it was coarse material that they used to weave tents. And what we would consider today would be like felt. Okay, so it's a pretty thick, dense covering to keep wind out, to keep things like that out. And then we also notice that instead of the gold, it's bronze that's used here. Nobody's going to see this, because it's going to be in between. The only time they see it's when they tear it down and put it back together. And nobody except the priests are going to see the inside, because they're the ones that bring it across. And when they do, it's interesting the way they do this. It gets into the ark, but we'll talk about it. It's probably next week's lesson. I won't get too far in on that.
I was just thinking, they have to start from the inside.
That's right.
So they cannot,
They can't go to the.
Yeah, they have to place everything where it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And build it.
Yeah.
Build
That's right.
around it. So they got to get it all built, okay?
Right.
But then they place stuff, and then they start.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they tear it down, they start just the opposite. So that's the last place.
That's right. They have to be very careful, and he'll, as we go through this, it's already told us they're only going to go in there one time a year.
That deal up there says no signal.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I turned it off back there. It got a countdown. It'll go off in a minute. It'll go off in a minute.
Okay.
I turned it on because I did some updated the computer last week or this week, and I was just checking it to make sure that it'll work before I get here Sunday and nothing
I was
happens.
just making sure that you weren't
Yeah,
spiking it
no.
offline or something.
No. I was going to try to show it up there, but I didn't have enough time to put them on a slideshow. So it says this goat's hair was wider by 3 feet or 2 meters. Yeah. This layer completely covered over the fine linen layer, and so the fine linen layer, or the heavenly set of coverings, was completely obscured and overlapped by the dark covering of the goat's hair. It was not open to observation even in part. This kind of goes to a type and a shadow. Heaven remained hidden to all of those who entered in through the door of the tabernacle. They couldn't see in. They had to go one way, and only the high priest saw it once a year, not all the others. Now, the other priests, the different groups of priests that they set up, it's another thing. They go in every day. They're changing the lights, the oil, not relighting, but refilling the lamps.
They
They're
gotta
changing.
burn 24 hours a
They
day.
burn 24 hours a day, so they may have to go in there twice a day to do that. They change the shewbread once a day. It told us that. They have to do things. And what's missing from in there? What would you think? We got the table of shewbread. We got the in that front part. We got the menorah, which is the lamps. There's no chairs.
No chairs.
No chairs. They're not sitting in there. You go in, you do your business, and you get out. And
They're
even
not
in the
there-
Holy
they're
of
not
Holies,
in there very long.
even in the Holy of Holies, there's not. What's the difference between that and heaven? There are chairs in heaven. There's a throne room, God's sitting on the throne, and here it's replicated by the ark in the middle. In heaven, though, there's a throne that when Jesus finished his work, he went and sat at the right hand of the Father. There's no sitting here. This is preliminary. It was meant to be, because that temple could be torn down, or when we get to heaven, the work's finished. And there's going to be chairs and things, we see 24 thrones around the middle of it. It's just amazing when you get into the depth of how this is representing heaven to us. It's slightly different because this is temporary. But it's just, to me, it's just amazing how they made this. So, of course, he had a plan, like you said, in part before this. So it shouldn't amaze us. A lot of people are amazed at, like, the movies, the Marvel movies, that they started out 10 years ago and made a movie with one person, and and then now it all culminates over here, and they tied all this stuff together. God already had all that figured out from the very beginning. His movie's 6,000 years in the making. It's been happening from the very beginning. Questions? Anything? Comments?
Interesting.
Let's go to the next covering. 14, and thou shalt make a covering for the tent of ram's skins, dyed red, and a covering above the badger's skins. You shall also make a covering of ram's skins. This covering of ram's skins was like fine leather dyed red. It doesn't tell us, this is a little different, doesn't tell us anything about the size or arrangement of these. So it may be very similar, or it may be a little, but we know it covers it. And if it was like before, it probably covered it similarly to the second layer, to the felt layer.
Is that 3 layers?
So far, you got the felt, and then the goat skin, and the ram's skin, and then finally says a covering above that, the badger skin. So that's 4 layers. We get to the next one, and if you go back and look at it last week, that's what it said. The outer covering, the badger skin, whatever it was, and they said maybe again, it may be the porpoise or sea cow or some animal, that their skin, it was naturally water repellent. And this is what it says. It was durable and water resistant. It wasn't particularly beautiful from the outside, so it didn't look very good, but it didn't mean to look very good. It didn't have to look very good. What was beautiful was inside, and that's what, again, represents, a lot of people, we don't look too good. But the inside is what God sees. We don't see it, what's on the outside of us. When these 4 layers of curtains were laid one over another, the result was very dry and a very dark tent. The only light came from the lampstand, from chapter 25 that we talked about last week. My point is, okay, you go in the Holy of Holies, it's darker than dark. do they take a light in there with them? I don't know. I don't see that. One place I do read, they do take a coal, ashes, some red hot coals from the altar. They take it in with them and lay it in front of the altar. We'll see all this later. So that gives a little bit of light, but of course, with it being about the only thing in there, you know,
Yeah,
you
imagine.
really don't want to run into it. So I'm thinking maybe they pull it back so the light can shine in. I don't know. Maybe not.
Don't you know, from the natural standpoint, think, man, that place would be hot.
It would be hot in the
Because
summer.
it's
You're in a
in the
desert.
desert.
It would be
And you
hot.
got goat skins.
Wow.
Yep, all that there. Okay, so it
Says
says,
you wanted to freeze blue any of them.
Yeah.
That's what happens.
yeah, it wouldn't be too breezy for sure. It says boards on the side of the tent. This is 15. And thou shalt make boards for the tabernacle of the acacia wood standing up. Like we talked about last week, it's the same wood they made out of the altar and the poles that they made for the altar, or the ark, 10 cubits shall be the length of a board, and a cubit and a half shall be the breadth of a board. 2 tenons shall be there in one board, set one order one against another. Thus thou shalt make for all the boards of the tabernacle. Okay, so that answers my question. If it's 10 cubits, a cubit's a little bit further, so that'd be about 14 feet tall. So it doesn't, the curtain doesn't come all the way to the ground. And we'll see that here in just a minute if I'd have thought of that a little bit. So you have this board that's standing up, that's 10 cubits tall. 2 tenons, and it's a cubit and a half wide. 2 tenons shall be there in one board, set order one against another. Thou shalt make for all the boards of the tabernacle. So if you want to, it's not really, but if you want to think of it tongue and groove, that's kind of the way it is. The tenons are the 2 pieces. They put a couple of pegs in there that'll fit into the board on the other side. They'll have holes in the other side, so it slides in, is the way I view it. Now, some point here a little bit later, it talks about that maybe it wasn't a solid wall, maybe it was not, but I can't really see that with this. I would think that they would be pushed together. And thou shalt make make the boards of the tabernacle 20 boards on the south side, southward, and thou shalt make 40 sockets of silver under the 20 boards, 2 sockets under one board for his tenons, and 2 sockets under another board for his 2 tenons, and for the second side of the tabernacle on the north, there shall be 20 boards. Okay, so I take that back. The tenons wasn't in the side, the tenons were in the bottom, because that's what they're sticking down in the silver ingots that they made down there. They got like 2 pegs that go down into the ingots to help hold the board up. So 20 on one side, 20 on another, and there are 40 sockets of silver, 2 sockets under one board, 2 sockets under another board. And for the sides of the tabernacle on the west side, that's with the not quite as wide, thou shalt make 6 boards, and 2 boards shall be thou made for the corners, so it's 8 all the way across in the 2 sides, 1 on each side. And thou shalt be coupled together beneath, and thou shalt be coupled together above the head of it unto one ring. Thus shall it be for them. They shall be for 2 corners, and they shall be 8 boards, and their sockets of silver, 16 sockets, 2 sockets under one board, and 2 sockets under another board.
Did you draw all that?
Well, that's what I was going to say, that we need to
Yeah.
kind of, but I can draw out what I think it is, but I don't know what it actually is or not. So right now, if we, just ending with this piece, the east side, which is the gate, the open side, okay, as far as the boards, there's nothing. It's just got 2 sides down the middle and 1 in the back. And the back one is to hold out the Holy of Holies. The front one, so far, is open. We haven't seen anything else, and I don't think they had anything. But solid. So it says each board was 15 feet high and 2 feet 3 inches wide. I said 14, so it's a little bit off. So that makes sense that why it would cover over it. So you have 15, 15, that's 30, and then you'd have, if it went all the way across, I mean, if it wasn't, it was right on the ground, then it'd have to be up in the air if it's 20 feet across. So that's 20, and then 20 would be down a little bit. The backboard, the back side, the westward side, was 6 boards wide with 2 corner boards for a total of 8 boards across the back. And here it talks about they don't know if it's a solid wall or more of a frame. And it talks about the next one being coupled together, one top at the ring. Now here, it's how they hold them together. I think that's the back corner rings. They have rings that kind of hold them together, is the way I see it. And then each board rested on 2 sockets of silver, or a foundation of silver to hold them up. Now what kills me says each board rested on a base 264 pounds of silver, each one of those boards. That's not light. And you got how many of those? That was heavy. So it's.
You see why they make this, because they have to tear it down.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
When you read this, you think, well, I see them spend 40 years in the wilderness.
Yeah.
I mean, after tearing that down, putting it back up.
You know, when we first, well, it'd be difficult, yeah. When Daniel was little, he wanted a fort made. So I said, okay. We took off one spring break. I took off, and me and him, he was probably 7 or 8 then, I don't remember exactly. Him and his friend come over. So I had this in my mind, and I built it out of 4x4s. And he wanted 2 levels, so I built it, just right at 6 foot or 5 foot, I can't remember, for him, and another 5 foot up there. But I had it all together, had a plan in my mind, I don't think I ever drew it out, but we drew it square, made everything square, pegged it off, made each panel the same. Floor is the same as the side and the top. We got it all together and then did the same thing up there, except those were half panels, so he could look out, and then the roof. But I made that where all you had to do, and I marked each side, so all you had to do, it took the lag bolts that went on each side of them, and all you had to do is pull those 3 or 4 lag bolts on each side, and the bottom would drop, and the sides would come off. Because we brought it up here from Oklahoma City, went to Liberal, and from Liberal it went back to Oklahoma City. No, we built it at the first house in Oklahoma City, so it went back, and then we brought it here. And then Daniel got too old, and we didn't want it anymore. So now it's over here in Billsville. And he put 10 on the back of it and made a storage shed. So it's still,
Being used.
yeah, it's being used. But that's the way, if you build something like that you're planning to move it a lot, you knew you're going to make it easy to put together. And so
That was clever.
I see, this is what God was saying, this is going to have to go through. And it wasn't, I don't know how long it took him to put it together and tear it down. But it was a pretty big process.
Again, wonder who did it. Did the priest do it?
I think, I'm not sure, the priests and probably the Levites. Now, they really haven't they talked to us about the 70 elders at first that went up with Moses and Joshua. So I'm thinking it's some of those leaders, because they really haven't set the Levites out yet. We know Aaron is going to be the high priest, but he hasn't really said that yet. Okay, it's coming, and especially with the garments that he's going to have, and his sons are going to be the Levites. But I think that's true. I think it's either the priests and the Levites are the ones that take care of this, because
especially the holies of holies.
Oh yeah, well he's the high priest is the only one going in there.
I mean, even putting it together.
Putting it together, but the ones that the ark itself, it has to be moved by certain people. It's moved on those poles. I think they rotated who they used when they moved them. Probably wasn't the same people all the time, but they had them. And let's see, let's go ahead and finish through this because there's not that much left. And then we'll talk a little bit about the ark that was from last week. So the silver is a little less. It's not gold, but it's the silver. So when you see inside, you're going to see the bright gold, and then at the bottom you're going to see the bright reflecting, okay, the silver, because it's going to be bright and polished. And I mean, silver is. After a while, after 40 years, it may tarnish. But so that, to me, that's amplifying that light or reflecting that light. So it helps when the menorah is in there. It gives you a little more light. It's just using it efficiently. Okay, here it says Jesus was betrayed for silver. The tabernacle's foundation was silver, pointing to the redeeming work of Jesus. And how many silver pieces?
30
Did
pieces.
Jesus? 30 pieces of silver. So here again, it's just kind of emphasizing what was going to happen later on.
Well, just in all of this, just think of, okay, they gotta have silversmiths,
Mm-hmm.
you gotta have goldsmiths, you gotta have
Weavers,
people that work in brass,
brass.
you got weavers, you know,
The carpet
dyer,
people.
I mean,
They got to make all that, all these, and you got to remember they did a lot of this. I'm pretty sure for Egypt, they'd been there for 400 years, so they knew they had people that was in there that knew how to work this. Verse 26 says, "And thou shalt make bars of the acacia wood, 5 for the boards on one side of the tabernacle, and 5 bars for the boards on the other side of the tabernacle, and 5 bars for the boards on the side of the tabernacle for the 2 sides westward. And the middle bar in the midst of the boards shall reach from end to end, and thou shalt overlay the boards with gold, and thou shalt make the rings of gold for places for the bars, and thou shalt overlay the bars with gold. And thou shalt rear up the tabernacle according to the fashion whereof, which was showed thee in the mount." So here he's telling them, we don't hear the specifics, but God told them how to do it, how to move it, what to do first, what to do second, what to do third, and then you do it in reverses going through. Now this, what I envision this is these boards standing upright, 15 alongside. Then they put these boards, 5 bars, it's talking about, with rings coming out, holding it together. So these are stabilizing it. So you're getting a frame, is what you're getting in there. It's kind of what I see. And it says, "Then the middle bar shall pass through the midst of the boards from end to end." So I don't know if the 15 foot were a hole in it, so that bar would slide through. I don't know. That's the way the description kind of comes to me, as I understand it. Because it says that the middle bar was invisible. It's the way they said too, and that's the way I kind of read that.
I like that what he said beneath that, that speaks of both the visible and invisible unity of God. You know, all of this, God is so awesome. You know what I mean? And when we think about it, His Word, to me, I think when I read the Word, the 10 Commandments, God specific, and those things, He didn't give us those things to burden us.
No.
He set them to set us free.
What Paul says there later on in the New Testament, you know, some people are tongues, some people are arms, some people are ears, but altogether it's the body of Christ. This is what it is. Each piece of this went together and it made the temple, made the tabernacle. Without it, it wouldn't be. Same thing that Paul was referring to here. That the church is very similar to it. We have very similar pieces and parts in it. Each play their part. Later on in the New Testament, instead of the priests, it's the pastors, the teachers, and the evangelists, and the preachers. So it just goes on and on and on. Just amazing how it reflects it. We can read over this stuff and it just passes over. Oh yeah, but if you start thinking about it, start looking at it, it's amazing to me.
Can you imagine it after it's all finished, standing back going, Wow, wow.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you study
It's like God
this,
did.
then you go over in Hebrews,
Yep,
it just,
yep,
wow.
yep, starts coming on.
You're in awe.
The last part of this is the veil, 31, 33. And thou shalt make a veil of blue, purple, and scarlet, and fine twined linen of cunning work, with cherubims shall it be made. So very similar to the curtains that was made earlier. And thou shalt hang it upon 4 pillars of the acacia wood, overlaid with gold. Their hooks shall be of gold upon the 4 sockets of silver, and thou shalt hang upon the veil under the taches, that thou mayest bring in thither within the veil of the ark of the testimony. And the veil shall divide you between the holy place and the most holy place. So this is the veil, what we call the veil of the temple. This is the veil of the tabernacle. So again, it doesn't tell us, it tells us there are, again, some separations, and this veil is hanging down from it, but it doesn't give us the detail that it gave us in the others. It's inside a box, so it's from side to side. We pretty well know, you know. So you could kind of take those measurements and go from there. This veil was a barrier, and no priest could go beyond the veil into the most holy place except the high priest, and he could only go on the Day of Atonement, which today we know that as Yom Kippur. That's where the Hebrews or the Israelis celebrate now. Spiritually speaking, in dying for our sins, Jesus with his own blood, he entered the most holy place once and for all, having obtained eternal redemption. This is also where the veil was torn in the temple, in the permanent sanctuary, opening it up before it could only be accomplished once a year. Jesus opened it up wide open so we could go anytime we want. We could approach the throne of God. That's just amazing for us. Okay, and it just continues on what I said. You can read through this. It says, there are many who have never get to go beyond the dividing veil. They know the brazen altar of atonement and the laver of daily washing, the golden altar of intercession, but they never admitted to that blessed intimacy and communion which sees the Shekinah glory between the cherubim and the blood-sprinkled mercy seat. They never get to that place. Some people, they just don't. And I don't know why, but we need to always continue to seek him. 34, and thou shalt put the mercy seat upon the ark of the testimony in the most place. So that's the lid that goes on the ark. And thou shalt set the table without the veil, or outside the veil, and it's talking about the showbread table, and the candlestick, or the menorah, over against the table on the side of the tabernacle toward the south. Thou shalt put the table on the north side. So the shewbread table's on the north side, and the menorah is on the south side. So it's very specific as how it wants, how he wants it in there. Now, and if you remember from last week that we had the picture, it was long. It's twice as long. I think it's twice as long as it is wide, and that the back part, the Holy of Holies, is square. So the front part is like twice as big as the Holy of Holies. And so far, we can see into the Holies because it doesn't have a veil on the outside that it's told us yet, but you can't see past the Holy of Holies. Now, it may have had another covering. We'll follow that in a little bit, but it hadn't told us this. The furniture in the holy place spoke of the 3 obligations of walking with God. First, the altar of incense represents the prayer. The table of showbread represents the fellowship. And the lampstand is to receive illumination, to understand from God. Now the screen for a door. And thou shalt make a hanging for the door of the tent. See, finally we get to the door, if you want to say it that way. It's gotta have blue and purple and scarlet, fine twine linen, wrought with needlework, and thou shalt make for the hanging 5 pillars of acacia wood, and overlay them with gold, and their hooks shall be of gold. And thou shalt cast 5 sockets of brass for them, not the silver. So on the front, now's the covering. It's the last thing, at least it's the way it's described, and it's pretty much all the same. Now, the only thing it doesn't talk about is the cherubim on this. So it's just the purple and the scarlet and the blue with this twine linen.
Screen, it must have let a
Little light in. We don't know. Now, one of the places, I kind of skipped over it, but it said that veil, maybe back here, or maybe it is in Matthew Henry as I was reading it. I think they said it was 3 fingers wide. So that's that's how thick it was. That is one thick veil. So there's no light getting through that baby at all. And I'm sure it may have been the same with the temple after they built the temple. I think it was in Matthew Henry. I may have read that in his commentary. But what I was going to say, the altar, the ark, when they went to go and move the ark, and it's not represented here, but I think it will be later, they covered it. It's the only thing, the poles never left the ark. It was always in place. It tells us that before. They leave them there, and so if they need to move it, they can move it. Now the other two, the table of showbread, it had the bars in it too to carry it with it. It didn't say don't remove those, so they probably removed those, may have removed those. But the ark never was. And it talks about that when it goes through the ark, those poles are like 10 feet. It's not quite the entire distance, it's 20 by 20. I think it said those poles are like 10 feet on each side, but the pole touched the front of the ark. It may get into it next week. I was reading ahead a little bit, but it was always covered. So they never saw it after it was built. Whoever built it, and they covered it once it was put into place, and once they put each of the items in it and put the top on it, the only one that saw it was the high priest.
When you go through all this, you understand how come when they were moving it, when they found it and they were moving it, you understand why God let them know this is serious business.
It is.
They already knew that, you know what
Right.
I mean, when they knew it.
And it, for us, we went through it in 30, 40 minutes here, but it took God a while to tell Moses how to do it and show him the plans and all this, 40 days he's going to be up there.
Well, I see him, but he had to do a lot of writing, didn't he?
He did a lot of writing, he sure did.
Or he had a photographic memory.
Had a good memory. I'm sure he wrote it down. I'm sure that's what took a little while. He, under inspiration for sure, but he had to write it down. And like they said, if he wrote on stone, that took a while. No, I don't think he wrote. He had the ram skins or the lamb skins that they use as scrolls. So, any questions? Any comments?
Very interesting.
God is awesome.
We will continue next week. Thank y'all. Oh, already cut him off. I forgot.